These are metrics that we used to use. It's happening across Canada, it's happening internationally, and with funders and institutions experimenting with different ways of describing research contributions and the context, so we can give more context and description to the research work we've done. And so narrative CVs are one example of that shift. So there's others we've talked about to do with Dora and other kinds of conversations I'm sure you're engaged in, but today we're talking about narrative CVs. So, I forgot to practice using the clicker. Hopefully it's very simple. Yes. So here's our agenda for today. We'll be talking about what is a narrative CV, why they matter, kind of the why behind it, and any context, why now, some things you can do to prepare, Q&A, and then some a chance for you to give us some feedback on what might help you prepare. So next slide. What's a narrative CV? We have a definition up here. It's a type of CV focusing on written descriptions of researchers' skills, experiences, collaborations, and achievements that seeks to promote more equitable and responsible research assessments. So when we're thinking about research, sometimes that one single line on your CV doesn't really convey everything that happened and all the impact or your roles in the research project. And narrative CVs give you an opportunity to provide more context. So basically a chance to explain what you contributed, why it mattered, what evidence supports the contribution. Basically making visible the work that's really difficult to capture in that list that we've been using up till now. So a structured way to describe contributions, context, and impact. I'm going speeding through what's on my notes here, but we'll have a chance for questions. So maybe we'll get into some of the stuff in my notes then, but I don't want to take up too much time. So next I'm going to talk a little bit about why narrative CVs matter, values assessment, and such like that. My part where I'm focusing more on the higher level, the context, the why, which is really important, and Yvonne will then take over and talk a bit more about some practical aspects, some from her deep level of expertise to do with supporting grants over the years. So narrative CVs, they ask us to look beyond what we've been providing before, journal prestige, grants, publication lists, employment history outputs. They make room for things like contribution, context, qualities, significance, influence, or approach. For any of us who put that one little line down, but it doesn't really, on our CV, but it doesn't really tell the story of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it, or a novel approach, or something that was really unique about it, this gives us a chance to add more context. So evidence-informed context. So you might do things like describe leadership in a collaborative project, or explain the research impact that goes beyond just citation count. So what difference did this make, I don't know, in a program that was planned, or in the way a project was approached, or a policy, or maybe the way things are taught, or the way we understand something like that. Knowledge mobilization, so that goes, I was talking to a professor who was talking about how they're in education. Teachers, they look at videos and podcasts. They're not going to look at the journal literature, so maybe talk a bit about knowledge mobilization. This gives you a chance to talk about how you got your research into the hands of the people who can use it. Barriers and opportunities that maybe helped shape your career path. Those are things that aren't listed in your CV necessarily, the CV we have now. And mentoring as well. So yeah, this is a broader shift. Narrative CVs are just one element of it. There's other things that we talk about, kind of bound up in the discussion about Dora and responsible research assessment. This is maybe summarizing a bit what I already said, but we're going from counting inputs. Not that we're throwing all that out, but to explaining contribution, what you contributed, why it mattered, who used or benefited from it, what changed because of it, and what context shaped the work. So there's still room there for some of those elements that we already have, those citation metrics or whatnot, but you can talk a bit more about why that matters and what impact that might have had. I can't remember what slide is next, if I should talk about this. Let me see. So I just wanted to stop and just say that this change, I think as I said, it's a part of the larger research assessment kind of push to change culture that's happening. But when we were reviewing Design DORA, I was just struck by how much it really does already capture the way we approach research at Mount Royal, the way it's talked about, our research plans and our tenure documents. And the same thing with narrative CVs. We're talking about research that advances knowledge, informs teaching, promotes community engagement, undergraduate mentoring. We have such amazing students here. All these kinds of things. And what the narrative CV does is really give you a chance to talk about that. Gives you more space for that. In a structured way to discuss it, I guess. Sort of structured. There isn't much structure in some of the examples, the templates we've seen so far. So the Canadian context, just so across Canada, this is coming. That's why we're talking about this now. I think originally they were going to be rolling it out this year, but now it's moved, and I don't know if we have a definite timeline. But in Quebec, they are going forward with rolling out narrative CVs with the provincial funding. That's happened there, so those are just coming in now. I have a colleague I've been talking to him a few weeks ago about how that's going, so getting a bit of an understanding for their experience, what they're seeing, and I think people are still learning about how to write a narrative CV. He was talking about how assessment of them, it seems to make a big difference if people are understanding why we're doing this. It's not just like a change in format, going from, say, one platform to another. It's really about the underlying approach or rationale for what we're doing, and that was really helpful in terms of people who are filling it out and evaluating them to have that understanding about what the goal is, to get that wider context, I guess. But there's still early days there too. They hadn't, I don't think, actually given out any funds yet. It was still at the stage of completing the survey or the CVs and handing them in for the grant, in response to the grants calls. In many countries in Europe, they are much further along than we are, and there we are starting to see things like research reports and things looking at what the experiences were like for reviewers, for researchers, and maybe areas to improve, which is good. Maybe we can learn from that. As you maybe are probably already thinking, these aren't perfect, but neither is our current system perfect. So we were just joking that we're here talking about narrative CVs that aren't a requirement yet, that we don't really have a template for, that we're not experts in. Well, Yvonne's probably much better suited than me because that's their experience, but there are still things I think that we can do, and I think the awareness will really help us. So it's important to start thinking about now. And we can look to Europe definitely and learn from them. So yes, it's a broader move. So I think I really hope that we can keep that in mind as we approach it, because that will help us be more successful, I think, in approaching it. So it's a system change, not just a format change, and they work best. I jumped ahead, I guess, in my comments. Best if we understand the purpose. So it's sort of provide that broader evidence for contribution, the context for your career path and research programs, recognition of diverse outputs, impacts, less reliance on journal prestige. We've already been talking about that for a while, and simple counts, and basically more meaningful assessment. And I think, like, maybe if you look just at our traditional CVs versus a narrative CV, it looks hugely different. But if you think about things that we're already doing, like for the tri-agency grants, they have the major contributions section, I think. Yvonne, to make sure I get my words right. We're already doing that. We already talk about our research. We give little presentations. We meet someone and we talk about, well, why is it so important that I do this? What's the impact? And we already do those kinds of things, or in interviews, or other places. So maybe it's quite different than the normal CV that we have, but it's not really. There are places we're already kind of doing this type of thing, providing that context of that bigger picture. So I think one of the big reasons we really wanted to start talking about this now is that it felt before like we were going to have to do this in September and we weren't going to be ready. Now we have maybe a year, and it'll be great if, I mean, this is probably like a thing I wish I did always in my life, which is like prepare ahead of time for things I know are coming to make my own life easier. And so there are things that we could start tracking and thinking about for research projects that we're working on right now that then we can use to feed into this, into these narrative CVs as we build them in the future. And so that's really what we kind of wanted to talk about today, some of those practical things that maybe, you know, we all learn about how to do research and we set up our systems and they become easy for us because we've done them a million times as you do your research project. And this might be a little bit different to be trying to track some of the broader impact or the broader story behind your research as you go. And getting that to be a habit that you start now is a great idea, or else it'll be more difficult in the future. So say look back and say, I know I mentored some people, but who was that and what happened? But maybe capturing that as you go along. For example, for my annual report, I always regret not doing more of this, but like as I go through the year, okay, that's something that I might want to report on there, and tagging it and putting it in my email just under a label in my folder. It's not much work, but now that I'm remembering to do that, well, they stop the annual reports every year. But anyways, probably the year I started to do it. Now it's much easier than to go through ridiculous amounts of email to find out what did I do this year. So that's kind of what I was thinking about when I'm thinking about preparing ahead, is making note of that. Dimension, the supervision, the influence, trying to think about those stories and maybe just tagging them, making short notes or context. Okay. This is close to our transition slide. I don't know. Let's see.
I can talk about this now.
All right. Do you want me to do the slide, or do you want to do it?
I can do it. Oh, it worked. Okay, so you're probably wondering why we're talking about this now. Ever since I started in research administration, which is in 2011, the federal government has been talking about bringing in a new grants management program. So this has been a rumor for a long time, but now they seem like they're actually going to do it. So that's part of the reason why we still don't have a set in stone timelines, because they've been working on this for a long time. So that's the best we can give you right now, is why we wanted to present this now, is that the federal government is gearing up. Institutions across Canada are gearing up. So now is the time to become aware that this is going to happen. So the narrative CV, when it comes to tri-agency funding, is going to be called the tri-agency CV. So the narrative CV for tri-agency funding is going to be called the tri-agency CV, or the TCV. And the reason it hasn't come in now, except for specific funding competitions, is because we need the platform that can handle it. And that new platform is going to be the new grants and grant management system, which will hopefully come in the next couple of years. Again, the federal government has not given us a definite timeline, but we need that platform, because right now, those of you who have applied for tri-agency funding know that it seems like every different competition has a different platform. You've got to log into a portal, you've got to fill out a grant application, you've got either their CV, or you've got to affix your CCV or something. Every competition is different. The grants management system is hopefully going to be the one system that rules them all. There's this grand plan that they've been talking about for, like I say, over a decade. The TCV does not fit within our current portals. It doesn't fit with the SHRC portal, either all of them. It doesn't fit within the research portal that NSERC uses. It doesn't fit within the convergence portal. It doesn't fit anywhere. They need a new portal, and that's going to be the grants management system. So right now, only those competitions that are outside a portal, like, do I have it here? I don't. I thought we had a slide. Oh, here it is. So like the CIHR Catalyst grant, it's very old school how you apply for that. It actually has a signature page that people have to actually either PDF, put their PDF signature or ink signature on it, and then the primary applicant has to upload it into the system. It's archaic, but because it's archaic and it still has that flexibility, the tri-agency is able to use the CIHR Catalyst Grant as kind of a pilot for the TCV. So that's one of the competitions right now that is already currently using the TCV, like it just started. Again, some CIHR team grants. You'll notice that a lot of this is CIHR. They're the first ones out of the gate, always. No SHRC and CIRC NREF grants as of March 2026. Usually we get a warning when a competition, when the requirements for a competition change, we get a warning a year, 8 months in advance that say these competitions coming up for this year will be affected, and we will let you know. We haven't had any warning yet. Right now, ballpark is fall 2027. That's the ballpark. But again, who knows, things could change. However, because we know it's going to be coming in, we're building supports right now because this is a major change. This isn't just the TCV, this is also going to be the grants platform for tri-agency that's going to change. It's going to be a major shift. So we wanted to get the word out to make sure that everybody's aware and you can start to prepare so that you're not just worrying about your grant application and the platform. You can just worry about your grant application and everything else will hopefully settle out. Now, what did I miss? Okay, so you're probably wondering about the TCV template. Do we have the information on it right now? This is what we've got. Seriously, this is it. The tri-agency has put this up on their website, which is a picture of it right here. You can go to their website and you can download this. It's less than half a page. It's 3 points: a personal statement, most significant contributions and experiences, which Francine kind of alluded to before, and supervisory and mentorship activities. If you've been applying for grants for a while, the second two should look familiar. The first one, the personal statement, should be the only one that you may be unfamiliar with. But the most significant contributions, that's usually a part of grant applications, as well as the supervisory and mentorship activities. They want to know how you're training your students and what your students are getting out of it. And that's it. That's all the guidance really we have from tri-agency. Do you want me to keep going? Is this mine?
Yes,
this is mine? Okay. So we thought that maybe we'd give you what we thought, what Jem and I thought, was some direction. Because you're probably wondering, like, if you've never filled out a most significant contribution statement or a supervisory and mentorship statement, what does that look like? So I went to Jem and I said, okay, so for somebody who's never filled out a grant application, what are some prompts that I can use to help me start this? And Jem and I was actually pretty good about this. For the personal statement, it said focus on your why. And when I'm talking to researchers, this is usually what I drill down into. Why is it that you're doing the research topic that you're doing? There's got to be a reason why you want to spend your life doing this, why you've already spent 10, 15, 20 years already doing it. Why? What is that spark? What is it that drives you? Why did you start? What is it that keeps you going? And so Jem and I talks about the North Star. Like, again, what is that central problem? What is it that drives your research? What is your unique background? And again, when I'm talking to researchers, I want to know what is it about them that makes them unique? Why is it them that NSERC or SHRC or whoever, what funder, should pick them above everybody else in this research field? What is it about them that makes them unique to do this project now? And so that should be part of your personal statement. Impact. If your research program achieves its ultimate goal over the next 5 years, how will the field or society be different? Sometimes when I sit down with a researcher and I ask why they're doing their research, it's because something has failed them in the past or they found a gap. And because of that failure or that gap, they want to then change the way the world is, change the way the system is. They want to make a change in the world. They want to make an impact. And so that research impact, that should also be part of your personal statement. Why you want to make that change. What started it all? And then the journey. Briefly describe your career trajectory. And if there are any non-linear paths, leaves of absence, or shifts in discipline that have shaped your current perspective. So, like the COVID pandemic, that's been a career interruption for a lot of researchers. You can put that in your personal statement. Any sicknesses, any big life events, that again can go into your personal statement. That's where all that fits within the narrative CV. So the second part of the narrative CV, or the TCV for a tri-agency, is the most significant contributions and experiences. And again, I went through Gemini and I asked it for some prompts. And this section should really focus on your so what. So if the personal statement focuses on the why you're doing it, this section focuses on so what. Innovation. What was the specific gap in knowledge that you filled, and what is the evidence that others have used or built upon it? The collaboration prompt, because maybe it's not so innovative, maybe you work through innovation. Think of a time that you worked across disciplines or with other non-academic partners like industry or community groups, even First Nations groups. What was the outcome of this synergy that would not have been possible alone? So under this section, you can really also focus on your collaborations and how those work together and make connections between, let's say you worked with somebody and that led you to this idea, which led to this grant, which led to this collaboration. You can really connect those dots all across the time. And then down bottom, knowledge mobilization. Beyond traditional publishing, how have you shared your findings to ensure they reach the people who need them the most? A typical example I give is that I used to work a lot with researchers who worked with K-12 teachers. And the teachers, because they're K-12, they don't have access to peer-reviewed publications. They don't care, they don't have time to read them, and they're locked behind a paywall. So when a researcher is then just publishing in peer-reviewed publications to suit their tenure and promotion report, it gets lost to the audience that needs them the most, the K-12 teachers. So they say that they went and they found how the K-12 teachers want their information. And usually it's in short YouTube videos. So those people who successfully disseminated their research results for K-12 teachers usually went to YouTube and made little short YouTube videos that teachers could then watch in their breaks, in the evenings, on their off time, and get the information that they need in a way that they need it to then take it back to the classroom and make a difference. That's the kind of knowledge mobilization that cannot usually be captured very well in a traditional CV or in your tenure and promotion report, but it can be captured in a narrative CV. So, the very gracious and generous Trevor Day allowed his Insert Discovery Grant from 2016 to be used, and I plumbed it for an example. And for most significant contributions, so this is in the context of science, okay? It's not your K-12 YouTube type stuff. We're talking peer-reviewed publications. And what I wanted to show you with this is how Trevor has broken it down into what makes it successful and really drives home the so what. Okay, so the first sentence, I developed and characterized a novel something or other. Okay, so right off the bat, he developed something and it was novel because. That should be one of your first sentences. Why is it significant? I developed this and it was novel. And then after describing it a bit, what happened because of that? Now completing an additional manuscript that adds a novel 3D perspective. Is that Trevor?
Yes.
This is what?
Painful.
This is great, Trevor. What are you talking about? So, connecting the dots. He developed something. What was it? Why was it important? What it led to? What it showed, or what it was challenging it, what was challenged, and then what led from that. Our work has catalyzed a resurgence of interest. Okay, so he's connecting the dots from he did this, he got that, it showed this, and then it led to this. And then, because of an increase, because of this evidence that he just did, there's been an increase of interest in the topic. So then, there's more research possibilities. And then that led to why he's proposing to do what he's going to do right now. Okay, so it links everything together. And in successful most significant contributions and experience sections, this connection really drives home the so what. It makes the reviewer or the reader care, which is really what you want. You want the reader to understand what you're doing, where you're coming from, why it's useful, and where it's going to go in the future, what has led you to this moment in time. Okay, Trevor, we're going on now. So the last one, supervisory and mentorship activities. So if we went from the why and the so what, your reader now wants to know how you're growing the next generation of researchers. And this is always important because Tri-Agency is very focused on your HQP, or your highly qualified personnel, and what you're doing to train them so that they can go out into the world and make a change in the world, kind of like you did, or are doing. So a success story. Describe a specific instance where your mentorship directly contributed to a trainee's success. So this is where I'm going to show you in a second a spreadsheet where you really need to keep track of your students, of where they go to next, keep track of what they're doing and what they're doing in life, because you're part of their journey. And their success is partly because of your success, and you have to link those together. You can also use an EDI prompt. How do you intentionally create an exclusive and diverse environment within your research group? And there are some people for researchers that really strive to be inclusive with their research group, not just with their students, whether it's working with their collaborators, recruiting students and research participants, how they're doing that, how they treat people within the group, and then also in the research design, how they're including people within that. So if that's more your thing, you can use that prompt. You can also use a philosophy prompt. What is your personal approach to supervision? And as a lot of people at MRU have a very big teaching load, you probably have done a teaching philosophy statement. This is kind of like that. What is your personal approach to supervision? How are you going to train your students? So all of these prompts are just to help you start from scratch, building your narrative CV so that when the time comes, you can actually do it. Oh, hang on. So,
Do you want to go to your sphere?
yeah, can you go to my spreadsheet, please? So I drafted a very silly example so that you can have a look of how, this is just an example, I'm not saying you have to do this, but I have,
Is that big enough? Is that?
I hope you can all see this. So yes, I'm one of those people who like spreadsheets. I have a spreadsheet for everything. And so this is just a very brief example, again silly, of, let's say I've got a project. Okay. So let's say in my personal statement, because apparently here I like goats, I grew up on a goat farm and I found that there was a gap in research. So I grew up and I wanted to study goats. And so I have this idea, I want to figure out how high can goats jump. So I got an IRGF as a seed grant, $5,000. And in this table, you can actually list everything, which if you are one of those people who has multiple projects, multiple funders, with multiple either HREB certificates or animal care or whatever, sometimes you need a bit of organization. And I have met some people that they need a spreadsheet. They really, really need a spreadsheet because they cannot keep their accounts straight, they cannot keep their certifications straight, and that's caused them problems in the back end. So yeah, you can put everything in here. So I've got everything from the funding amount, how much you've got to spend, your account number, your ethics number, and then what you started to produce out of it. So list your publications, and then you've got them all in one spot. And then you can say, list your conferences, so that again, you can link back to your project, to your funder, when it happened, and you can link all the way through to your outputs, and then hopefully find a connection between those so you can figure out what led to what. Because if IRGF in this context is seed funding, then hopefully that led to the NSERC DG that I got in 2006, which led to $30,000 a year. Woohoo! And then that led to more publications. I've only got one listed here because I was running out of time. More conferences, but you can see, like the first publication I had was just in a local newsletter. And then I got into a national publication. What? Which is pretty good. And I went from having one student to having 4 students. And they went on to do lovely things. One went to Texas A&M, one went to the U of C, which is fantastic. So you can start to see the connections when you lay it all out like this. And then going down, I had a little add-on because I wanted to see if goats could swim. And then all of this then led to a National Science Foundation grant, which, because I'm Canadian, I probably had a US collaborator. So you could probably add in here a column for collaborations and then list your collaborators so that you know who you collaborated with on what project and on what grant. So again, this is to help you see the connections in your own work so that you can then translate those connections to the most significant contributions and experiences. Do you want to do this one?
Sure. So we're thinking now then about how to prepare. Yvonne gave some pretty practical suggestions there. There are, as she said, 2 institutions are developing resources, and actually one of the best ones in the entire country comes from the University of Calgary. It's amazing. It's interactive. There's a short form, a long form. There's like steps. It's just really, really, really good. So there's lots of tools, or there are growing tools you can work through. But we wanted to talk about, as we learn together, what might help you. So maybe having a glass of wine and writing your narrative CV with a colleague, perhaps, or having a peer feedback sessions. Maybe just like sitting together, and because none of us are authorities in this, but talking about your research and how it matters. I was at an RSC when people were saying, well, I don't know how to talk about bench research, like what does it matter, or how do you talk about your medieval manuscripts or whatever else research that we're doing here. Maybe you want to practice talking about it, and maybe that would be good. Maybe if we have cheese and crackers, we can talk about our research. Or maybe we want to like build examples of narrative CV text together. Our writing workshop. A lot of the resources I've seen, I just wanted to mention that they are talking about the use of AI to help you in writing, because there is a concern, of course, might have come up in your mind, that we don't want to be this to be something that discriminates against folks who don't have a strong skill in writing or come from a different language, and so use of AI for writing is totally fine from what I've seen. But a writing session where you can use prompts maybe to get that feedback back and forth with an AI tool, we can share with each other, other kinds of more discipline-focused things. So we would like to know what might help you. You can put it in the chat or let me,
however.
Unmute yourself and let us know. We'll probably ask this question again out in the broader community. What do you think would be the kind of thing that would be helpful in terms of doing this?
So even if you can't think of something now, or you don't want to say it, that's totally fine. Francine and I are completely open. Just let us know, because we have time. Like we said, there isn't a definite timeline set for this yet, so we have time to help you prepare. But we do want to help you, so don't leave it to the last minute.
What I've been seeing people say, like, well, this you have the spreadsheet example that Yvonne has, but having a longer list that you can use chunks of it for different purposes. And when because you know the limit, I don't know if you saw that, it's 5 pages or 6 pages if you're in French for some reason for the CV. So you might, and what you choose to highlight would be different depending on the competition. I imagine you're the grants expert, but having that longer list of items and then you're picking and choosing. And so developing that longer list is something you could get started on now. I personally was experimenting with it and using some of the notes that I use in different like job interviews. I talk about my research or presentations, and then pairing that with my CV and using an AI tool to help me kind of get some draft text I could start with. I found that a useful thing to do. So we were thinking of this as a beginning of a kind of like a series of things that we can do to start talking about our research in different ways that would help feed into this. So we were thinking about like a lightning talks or informal sessions where we can get together, and we'd love to hear what people are looking for, what they think would be most helpful. Maybe you just want to sit by yourself in your office and work on it, I don't know. I was going to say anything else here.
There's a comment in the chat.
Robbie, do you have that? Can you read it?
So it says some examples of the TCV from the CIHR competitions.
Examples of TCV from the existing competitions.
The CIHR.
CIHR.
Sorry.
Examples.
Can you get sample CVs from the CIHR competitions? TCV.
I've tried. I have reached out all over campus asking for exemplars for the TCV. I can find one.
What do you mean campus? This campus?
This campus.
No, we're talking about broadly, since the CIHR is asking for them, then asking the CIHR for those competitions, if they would share some. Right.
Well, that's intellectual property of the researcher, so they'd have to get the consent of the researcher to share that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, people really do want examples, and we could probably work to try and find some, but they will look different for each competition.
Can we find some CIHR applications from other universities?
Yeah, that's going to be my next step for this. Like I said, I can only find one exemplar. Well, actually one person who's actually done a TCV on MRU campus. So my next step was going to be going out, and there are other institutions that have exemplars. Unfortunately, they're usually behind a paywall, so you have to, go out and ask the reacher. So it's a bit of work to track them down. We're on it. We're getting there. Give us time.
It's definitely what I've heard a lot of people ask for. We'll try and find some. But they still might look quite different when you do them for your specific competition.
Yeah, exactly. Because of the nature of the narrative CD, it's going to be not only tailored to the person, but tailored to the competition and the project or program that they're pitching for that competition. So to rely very much on an exemplar may not be your best option, but it can give you guidelines. But just be aware that by the nature of the TCV, it's going to be tailored to the researcher, to the competition, and to whatever research they're proposing.
And we did see a presentation from someone in BC who was talking about the research office receiving those early TCVs, or it wasn't TCVs, it wasn't for this competition, but that there needed to be a lot of feedback, that the first times people were trying these, there was a lot of room for improvement, and so that part was really important, to have time to work on it, get some feedback, and try to tell your story a little, I mean, in a different, to improve your work, I guess. So.
Yes, honey.
Thank you both. This is really great and great to get this going. I think you mentioned a few times the tri-agency deadlines, and I would just say your slide on DORA and what we're trying to do around research impact at MRU would suggest it doesn't have to be tri-agency driven. And so I think it can help all of us to tell our story in a way that's meaningful in the MRU context. And one thing I might suggest is reaching out to your associate or vice deans of research just to see, we're rolling out a new faculty activity report. The CV will be a big anchor of that in terms of your performance. I'm not sure how deans and vice deans and associate deans feel about receiving narrative CVs, but it may be a way to start as well.
Yeah, looking for places to get feedback, it's a great idea.
Yeah, it's going to be a big change for everybody. So, and it's going to be, I think, a little bit difficult if there's regular CV requirements somewhere and then the narrative CV requirements elsewhere. It's going to be quite a contrast. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's also probably disciplinary differences,
Mhm.
you know, so talking definitely into
Absolutely.
it. Associate deans is good, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for the presentation. That was really helpful. And some specifics and prompts were really helpful. Wondering if you've heard back from anyone, like maybe last fall when we were at some RIC, such as the narrative CVs, like someone in Manitoba, maybe like director of the Office of Research, talked about using, just to try it out, using it for an internal competition, just so folks at the institution would have a chance to practice it. So I don't know if you, and I reached out and haven't heard back from them, and I wonder if any of you have heard of folks who tried it internally, like outside of Quebec, just to test out and what that experience has been like. And you may not have.
Yeah, well, I think Manitoba, as a smaller institution, were able to, I can't remember if it was added on, but they somehow got quite a lot of people participating and were using it. They weren't finished their competitions when I last talked to them though, but I think that people did need a lot of feedback, I think, like, so they could see some people were just handing in barely changed CVs from the list, and I need a lot of feedback. I talked to someone from Quebec, and he was saying for their internal grants they made it optional that you could add one in, but no one did that. There are things that you already do, like, you know, yeah, I guess having or like a modification where you're writing about your research in the major impacts part of the CVs that people are already used to writing. I don't think we have an abstract for our internal grants, right? So people might already have some experience doing that, but
I have heard from some people sitting on adjudication committees that when they receive the narrative CV, they're not clear on how to adjudicate it. The criteria are still being worked out, especially at the federal level. So, I mean, it's a culture shift all around. We're figuring it out from all different levels. Again, this is why we're starting early. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've heard some examples of people saying, like, it helps you, it really does help to understand the research, to see it written out this way rather than, say, a list of I don't know, chemistry publications where I might not understand all the terms, or geology or something. But other people have said it's difficult to understand, and they just go to the people's ORCID accounts externally to see a regular list of publications. That was in Europe, not here. So I'm not sure, so those are contradicting accounts of what the experience is like being a reviewer. So that's why I'm really interested to watch what's happening. Yeah, culture change I think is hard, and I think funding agencies often do push it. You know, they're the ones that have the money, they want to have the highest impact. And we have all these processes that are developed around previous systems that we are already changing, but it continues to push us forward, I guess. But it's not just the NRFCB, as you say, it's other things too.
Yeah, I appreciated, Yvonne, your background on the change to the program, the tri-agency program, and how long that's been talked about, because it all, I mean, on the researcher side of me, if I didn't think there was other value in the narrative CV, I'd be like, I'm just going to wait until they actually ask me for it, right? Given that, what the history is.
Absolutely, yeah. But I mean, there is a lot of value in it, especially depending on what your discipline is. Like I said, with the teachers, you know, they may not be represented well with the CCV or with a regular CV, you know, where it's just a list of publications, a list of students, you know, a list, and it doesn't properly capture the impact that they may be having in the K-12 classroom. You know, they may be going in person, doing a lot of service, reaching out, doing videos, the stuff that's usually captured under that service component of the tenure and promotion report. That can now be listed within the most significant contributions and linking it through to their research and how they're having an impact. And that can be really powerful.
Yeah, and I see some of my business colleagues online, and I think if you're looking for industry partners, the narrative CV can be really helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there are some disciplines that will find it very advantageous. They'll find it better represents them and what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think also it gives you maybe in the past, like if before only what comes on your CV are those like list of items, this can give you time, because you can build in more, to do more of maybe the things you might want to do that weren't always noticed before, because we're all busy and we prioritize what gets counted, I guess. You know, so I think it's nice to give space for researchers to talk about what has higher impact, and it helps them choose to direct their energy to places that maybe you wanted to, but you always have to prioritize. So,
Did the two of you have any concerns? You like, it sounds all very positive. Is there anything that makes you wary of the narrative CV?
Oh, those poor people who have trouble writing, whether it's filling the page or connecting the dots or making a story out of what they've done, or finding, you know, just general translating their research. That's a tough skill to learn. But it's going to be important in the narrative CV. You're going to have to tell a story about your research.
was there a comment there, Rabia?
Yes, Serena mentions that workshop for concrete calls, not necessarily short or tailored to a specific condition. And then the other one mentions a critical view at narrative CV, more about don'ts than do workshops.
Did you not hear that? I'll read it.
The last part.
I have a very loud teacher voice.
And there's a lot of white noise in here.
Yeah. So Irena is saying workshop for a concrete call, not necessarily short, but tailored to a specific competition. And then a critical view at narrative CV, more about don'ts than do's workshop. So the idea, this is what you should do. Could there be a workshop where you say, here's some things not to do? And then as we get to concrete calls, could we run workshops for concrete calls?
Right. Do you think a workshop around a call, maybe you're not even really going to apply, but it'd be a practice exercise, I guess, right?
Absolutely, because
To practice.
the only proviso I have with that is, like, for something for a CIHR Catalyst grant, they usually have a very short turnaround. So trying to schedule a workshop for a true applicant for that would be kind of tough. But yeah, if we want to do a practice session around it and take the guidelines and say, okay, you're going to be writing something for this competition, Go write your TCV.
Yeah, I was imagining maybe like inventing sort of like a TCD purpose, you know, like I wanted to do a certain project or achieve a leadership role, something where I could be choosing what to highlight for my career and write a.
I think a peer feedback session makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense, right? Like,
Yeah.
then it's not waiting on Yvonne.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, keep the suggestions coming in. We'll compile them and we'll see if we can
The
figure something
concerns,
out.
that's what was in my mind. But I think like the current system isn't perfect and this won't be perfect. I'm sure the rollout will be rocky in some,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
changing culture is really hard and this is about changing culture. So I think Eli, who I was talking to from Concordia, he was saying, yeah, if there's not someone like in the room who really understands the why behind the CV, you can end up just sort of like evaluating, like, I don't really know what this means. They got a big grant, they got a lesser grant, let's just go with that, you know? That's kind of reverting back to older ways of maybe of assessing things. Like, we have an illusion that if you can count numbers and compare them, that means one is better than the other. Maybe some do. I'm sure no one here, but so I think the rollout could be rocky for various reasons. It's not like I'm sure it's not. I think one of the goals is to increase fairness, I guess, between different applicants. But there's probably different ways that people will be have more of a challenge here. Like the writing, for sure, right? You don't need to be a great writer to be a fabulous researcher. And if we haven't built up supports here around that, and smaller institutions don't have it, the writing support, then that's going to be a challenge. So there's probably new ways that things will be difficult compared to the old ways. That I think that's why I wanted to like place the research assessment change kind of like in front of us. If we know kind of why we're doing it, where we're going to, then that might help us in the painful things while we figure out the process. And that if we can contribute to it in a good way, knowing that we're trying to get somewhere better, then that I think could be good. Sorry, I'm not very eloquent, but that's what I just want to think.
I wonder if verification will be an issue.
It could be.
I'm coming off Research Integrity Conference, so.
It could already be an issue.
Well, at least you can go to the journal to see if the publication actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I want to, yes.
Whatever comment, you can take one call as an example, not necessarily with a concrete deadline or timeline.
Right, take a call as an example, yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. Well, definitely the verification is an issue. And look, there's so many things happening in the world of research, and I pity the research office. You have so many things to keep track of, and they're so important. But the verification piece, like I mentioned, will be some people are turning to ORCID, right? You might want to keep what's publicly viewable about yourself up to date. That's maybe not just for narrative CVs, but for just the weird and wacky world we're working in right now with AI and what's happening. It's in a messy sort of space, right? Where so much out there is created by a bot perhaps, or perhaps by someone who just doesn't have much of a background. So if you can see that part, you can go to ORCID, or you can see some of the outputs, the things you've done before that show your trajectory and your history. That's a way of increasing trust. Sometimes people are putting out, for systematic reviews, you publish your protocol, or maybe if you can share your data, or you can other things that kind of build up like a profile about who you are for that trust piece. I know that's outside of a narrative CV, but
Or if you do
trust
a community engagement, perhaps there's a link to something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Interesting time.
Yes, it is. But we just want this to be not a one and done, but like a series that we start over the next year of talking and such.
Is there another comment?
First raise his hand.
Oh, Trevor?
Go ahead, Trevor.
Thanks, you guys. Hello from Windermere, right by Windermere Lake. Just wanted to say hello to everyone. Thanks so much for this start on this. Change is scary. The EEI stuff that came out a while ago was a big shift for people, and so this is just another shift. But I think it's going to be okay. Glad to know it's not rolled out this fall, so anyone applying for TriCASA stuff this fall is off the hook and can use their old listed templates. which maybe is okay at this later hour. I do have a concern, Connie raised some important thoughts about that. I think it's worth fleshing out, where the problems could be because it was fair. But those of us trained in quantitative metrics are reeling a little bit, Dora, I'm very supportive of Dora, but there's a downside in terms of those people that were trained in quantitative metrics have to do a bit of a shift. Is there a way, do you know in the new narrative CV, if there's a way to still capture numbers of training, numbers of papers and peer-reviewed journals, grant funding, those kinds of things? My take on peer review is that it's still going to be important. Peer reviewers still notice that those people that are pushing hard versus those that aren't. It's not just about the story. So I think there's going to be a balance we're going to have to strike between telling the story around impact, but also recognizing contributions from a quantitative standpoint. I don't think Dora eliminates that. It just says that and. So do you have a sense of that, of how this narrative CV might still capture some of the quantitative metrics that are still going to be important in some disciplines? Thanks.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything that says you can't put lists or numbers in it. But like you said, Trevor, it's the qualitative and the storytelling and if it serves your story to say I published 10 papers on this topic, then say it. If it serves your story to say the 4 students that I collaborated with on this paper went on to do big and better things at such and such universities or whatever, do it. There's nothing saying you can't, but it's more of, I think, how you're going to do it.
And I think you can have those numbers maybe, my understanding is, but they shouldn't be imagined to be standing in for impact, right? So you got a big grant. What did you do with it? What was the outcome?
Yeah.
Why does it matter that you published 10 papers versus 2, for example? So I think there's room for both, and it's about deciding if you only have 5 pages, what's the most important thing for you to put there? Numbers and explanations for them and context or anything?
Because the ultimate reason for the narrative CV, when you're attaching it to your grant application, is to demonstrate, to put it in insert terms, your excellence as a researcher. Why is it that how are you as a researcher positioned and prepared to do what you're proposing in your grant application? And so you have to set out a kind of case, and demonstrate your trajectory through your personal statement, why it's important to you, why what you're doing is important to you, and then how you're positioned in your most significant contributions. Everything to date, what I've done, whether it's through getting grant money, leading the grants, leading the projects, supervising the students, training students, getting to go on bigger, better things. You've got great collaborations, you've got a great network, you are well positioned to be doing this research at this time. So it's however you want to do it. So it's very much quantitative and.